You've been raising your energy your whole life, maybe through meditation, maybe through prayer, breathwork, intention setting, visualization, some version of the idea that if you do the right thing in the right sequence, something spiritual will shift inside you. And maybe it worked a little. Or maybe it worked once and then stopped. Or maybe you've been doing it so long that you can't tell anymore whether something is actually happening or whether you've just gotten good at performing the ritual. Here's what I want to ask you. What if the practice you're using to reach your divine nature is built on an assumption that makes reaching it almost impossible? Not because you're doing it wrong, because the assumption underneath the doing is wrong. That's what stopped me. Not a failure of effort, a failure of the framework I was using to understand what effort was supposed to accomplish. This video is about a specific practice, raising the divine spark, that I tried every night for 7 consecutive nights. And I want to tell you what happened. But before I can tell you what happened, I have to tell you what the divine spark actually is according to Gnostic cosmology, why most people have been handed a version of it that's been deliberately flattened, and why the difference between those two versions changes everything about how the practice works. Stay with me. This is going to go somewhere real. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Library. And the first thing I need to establish is what the divine spark is. Not the watered-down version, not the motivational poster version, but the cosmological claim the Gnostic texts actually make. Because the conventional framing gets it backwards in a way that matters enormously for practice. Most people encounter the divine spark as a metaphor, a poetic way of saying that human beings have some connection to something greater, inspiring, vague, ultimately harmless to any institution that wants to keep you sitting quietly in a pew. But that's not what the Nag Hammadi texts describe. Not even close. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most important Gnostic texts discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, describes the divine spark as a literal ontological fragment of the highest divine reality, the monad, embedded inside the human being without the knowledge or consent of the demiurge, the false creator god who built the material world. The demiurge in this cosmology doesn't want you to know this. The archons, the administrative powers of the material world, actively work to keep you identified with the body, with need, with petition, with smallness. Because the moment you recognize what you actually are, their entire system of authority collapses. Now, here's where it gets cosmically significant. The divine spark isn't something you're trying to acquire. It's not a reward for correct spiritual behavior. It's already there, fully formed, fully real, underneath the layers of material identification the archons have spent your entire life reinforcing. The Trimorphic Protanoia, a stunning text from the Nag Hammadi library, describes the divine light descending and dwelling inside human beings as a hidden luminosity, present but unrecognized. The language is extraordinary. The divine is not above you waiting to be reached. It is inside you, waiting to be remembered. That word, remembered, is not decorative. In Gnostic epistemology, gnosis isn't the acquisition of new information. It's the recovery of something that was always true. Knowledge, direct, interior, unmediated. Not what someone told you about God. The actual interior encounter with what you are. When I first spent serious time with these texts, and I mean serious, I remember one night in particular where I had the Trimorphic Protanoia open on my screen alongside a commentary I'd been working through for about 2 weeks, and I just sat there for almost 3 hours without moving. What hit me wasn't the cosmology, it was the implication for practice. If the divine spark is already present and complete, then every practice built on the premise of reaching it, earning it, ascending toward it, is aimed in the wrong direction. You're not climbing, you're uncovering. Now, one viewer from my video, I Tried Mary Magdalene's Monad Call, What Happened Shocked Me, left a comment that I keep coming back to. They wrote, I revoke all pre-birth contracts and agreements made under amnesia. I am a divine spark of the monad. What struck me about that wasn't the drama of it. It was the structure. That person wasn't asking, they were declaring. That's the Gnostic move. That's the difference between a practice that reinforces the distance between you and the divine and a practice that collapses it. As I covered in my video, Church God versus the True God, what they've been hiding your whole life, the institutional version of spiritual practice depends on maintaining that distance. Can't exactly build a system of hierarchical authority around someone's interior recognition of their own divine nature. The moment the spark is raised, not sought but recognized, the intermediary becomes unnecessary. That's not an accident, that's a feature. Of the suppression, I mean. The Gospel of Philip makes this explicit in a way that unsettled me the first time I read it. It draws a distinction between those who receive divine light unconsciously and those who receive it knowingly. The difference isn't in what they receive, it's in what they do with it. Unconscious reception changes nothing. Conscious recognition changes everything. That single distinction is the entire architecture of Gnostic practice, and it's exactly what the raising of the divine spark is designed to accomplish. So here's what I actually did. Every night for 7 nights, before sleep, I sat in silence for a minimum of 20 minutes and performed a specific interior practice drawn from the framework the Gnostic texts describe. No candles, no elaborate ritual. What the texts point toward isn't ceremony, it's orientation. A deliberate redirection of attention from the surface of experience to the witness beneath it. The practice moves in 3 phases. The first is stillness, not passive emptiness, but an active quieting of the identity layer. The constant narration of self, need, preference, history. You're not suppressing it, you're watching it until you notice that the watcher isn't it. The second phase is what I'd call interior declaration. Not prayer, not petition, but a direct address to the spark itself, framed in the language of recognition rather than request. Where prayer says, "Give me," the declaration says, "I am." It sounds like a subtle difference. It isn't. The third phase is sustained attention on the silence that follows. Not waiting for something to happen, attending to what is already there when the noise stops. Nights 1 and 2. Honestly, not much. Some quiet, some resistance. My mind wanted to convert it back into something familiar. Meditation, basically, with different vocabulary. I noticed that. That resistance itself is interesting. The mind trained by material identification doesn't want to recognize the spark because recognition means the small self isn't the whole story. That's threatening. Night 3 was different. I want to be precise about what happened because I'm not interested in overstating this. There was a moment, brief, maybe 30 seconds, where the usual boundary between the observer and the observed just wasn't there. No dramatic vision, no sound, just a stillness that felt less like absence and more like presence. Like the difference between an empty room and a room that is full of something you don't have a word for yet. It didn't last, but it was real. And when it passed, something remained that I can only describe as a faint but persistent sense of having been recognized. Not by something outside, but by something inside that I hadn't been paying attention to properly. I personally think this is the most underrated aspect of Gnostic practice. Not the cosmology, not the mythology, not the fascinating historical drama of suppression and book burning, but this specific interior move of treating recognition as the mechanism rather than devotion. It reframes everything. It means the practice isn't about becoming worthy, it's about becoming awake to what's already true. Nights 4 through 7 built on that. Not linearly, it wasn't like climbing a ladder, more like returning to a place you'd visited once and finding it slightly more familiar each time. The Pistis Sophia uses the language of light powers ascending, the divine elements within the human being moving toward reunion with their source. I had resisted that language initially because it sounded like the same ascent toward God framework I was trying to move away from. But I read it differently by night 5. The ascent isn't spatial, it's attentional. The light power doesn't go anywhere. It simply stops pretending to be less than it is. A viewer named Evander left a comment on my video, "I stopped praying to God and this is who actually answered," that stopped me mid-scroll. He wrote, "I always had this feeling of something off, especially when it comes to religions. I thought it was my need to fight the authority, but it took me—" The comment cut off there. But that fragment is exact. It took something. It took a framework that could hold the feeling that had always been there. The Divine Spark tradition is that framework. Not because it tells you something you didn't know, because it names something you already felt and couldn't articulate. Now here's what the 7 nights actually taught me about the practice itself. The raising of the Divine Spark is not a technique for generating an experience. It's a training in attention. Specifically, the attention required to hold the recognition of your own divine nature steadily against the constant pressure of material identification that the world and your own conditioned mind will apply to collapse it. The texts are clear on this. Irenaeus of Lyon, writing around 180 CE to destroy this tradition from the outside, inadvertently preserved its core insight in his attacks on it. The Gnostics, he complained, believed they were already saved by nature. He meant it as a condemnation. They meant it as a fact. That's the move. That's what 7 nights showed me. Not that the spark appears when you call it, that the spark is what calls and what answers and what sits in the silence between the two. The practice doesn't create it. The practice removes what's covering it. Stop seeking what you already are. Start recognizing it. You were not made to reach the divine from the outside. You were made to be the divine, remembering itself from within. If this landed somewhere real for you, if it named something you've been carrying without a framework to hold it, let me know by commenting, "I understood it."